You doing well? Excellent. Fantastic. Good to hear. Good to hear. We got about a minute or so before the others arrive. Right, so we'll be getting stuck into some things. Hello, Ensign, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. We're getting closer to the weekend, so that's always a good feeling.
Yeah, but the pathways are after the weekends.
Well, that is true. You do have that particular joy coming up, so that would be good. But it'll be good. You'll get it over and done with, rather than the sort of hanging around waiting, not knowing if it's going to happen or not. So,
Yeah.
I'd rather do that, to be honest. Just get it done.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. And it's your pathway one, so it's going to be a significant one, but also a one that will be over and done a lot quicker than your other exams. Your mock exams, etc.
Right, yeah.
Hello, Don. How are you? Good. Hello, Irina. How are you? Let's see if I can do this push button register business. All right. Tell me if you're there or not. You all right, Joel?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the morning and it's Friday. How are you, Kendrick? Hello, Ian. All right. Those of you who do the chats as opposed to say hello. All right. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've still got a couple that should be arriving, I would assume, but it is very early on a Friday morning. I have attempted to push the register button thing. What day are we today? 30. It's not showing up as the 30th. Why isn't it showing up as the 30th? I don't know. Close that. Hit the register button again. What does that do? Try that one instead. All right. Okay. Okay, so register. Yes, so as said, we do have a couple more people, hopefully, who will arrive, but it is very early Friday morning, so what's it? Now, as we talked about the other day, my plan for today, was to go through, hello Fatima, go through one little bit of theory that I would like to go through, just so that it kind of matches, okay? And you'll see what I mean when we get there. And then after that, what I would like to do is to open the floor so that if you have any particular questions that you want me to try and discuss, I mean, it might be a bit more difficult, but as it not being sort of face-to-face as opposed to doing it distance-wise, but if there is, then we can have a go at that. Thank you for those of you who've sent me questions in the email. Hopefully I have replied understandably to you. Please let me know if my feedback is not understandable. Sometimes I think I've explained myself and it turns out maybe I haven't. All right, I don't know if you get that. And yeah, I'm feeling a bit dazed and confused because I just spent an hour on the phone with the bank trying to sort out some banking stuff. Trying to call New Zealand to sort out banking, and of course I'm overseas, so then there are things, additional complications, as you can understand. All right, so I have posted the Nearpod link. So first thing to do would be to jump into the Nearpod link, which is PUQWR. So we're going to a little bit of time in here, and then we'll move on into questions, Q&A. All right, and as per normal, all right, we find it up in here. Okay, 19. Yeah, it might be doubling up because this is the one that we did the other day. So it might double up some of you. Okay, so we had a look at this idea here, just to review, this idea of consumer surplus, okay, which was the difference between what you were willing to pay for a good or a service and the market price set for that particular product. And because some of our individual consumers are prepared, they're prepared to pay quite a bit, right? This consumer surplus can actually be quite a large area. And it is the area of a triangle. It is a very regular geometric shape. And so, yes, you can foresee in the future where it might be possible for you to do a calculation as to how big the consumer surplus is and what has happened to it. It may be that the consumer surplus gets bigger, and in which case you need to then do another calculation, or the consumer surplus gets smaller, in which case you need to do a different calculation, well, same calculation, but making it smaller. All right, the rule of thumb that we said is that consumer surplus is always found underneath the demand curve and above the market price. Underneath the demand curve, above the price. Now that little rule is quite a handy one to remember, because what we find is that sometimes students lose track, particularly if they've got curves moving, they actually lose track of where the consumer surplus is. It sounds quite strange for that to happen now, but it actually does happen. All right, so you explained with an example, you've done that one. Now, there's the formula there. Okay, maximum price consumers are willing to pay minus the actual price that they paid. All right, a little bit of maths involved there. All right, this is it here in the market. There it is, that whole area there. All right. Below the demand curve, above the price. And I did want you to illustrate what would happen to the CS if the demand curve increases, but I might move on from there just for today. Where would you find it? I'll move on from there just today, because this is what I'm wanting to very quickly go through with you. All right. Excuse me. Just as we have a consumer surplus, on the flip side, within the market, you're also going to have a producer surplus, right? And it's the same basic idea, because what you've got is this is a market, so these are all individual consumers potentially, right? They're all different cost structures, right, based on how much it costs them to put the product into the market. So, you know, this particular producer, you know, they're prepared to put this product into the market at this price. This one, they're prepared to put it in at this price. This one, they're prepared to put it in this price, and so on, up until you get to here, which is the market equilibrium. So therefore, for a producer, their surplus is the difference between what they are willing and able to supply in comparison to the actual market price they receive for the product, okay? So it works out to be this particular triangular shape here, this, all right? And again, it's a triangle. So mathematically, half the base times the height, it's going to give you the area. So you're going to be able to work out the area of producer surplus, all right? And the rule is going to be that it will be found immediately above the supply curve and below the price, all right? And again, that's the reason why we highlight that, is because when we do start moving curves, then some students find it a little bit difficult trying to figure out where the surpluses are. So that's why above the supply curve and below the price. All right, so it's always that particular area. Okay, yes, it becomes a little bit more difficult if you start imagining, you know, hypothetically curved curves. All right, but you aren't going to have to worry about the curved curves. You are going to have to just worry about these straight line curves for this. Right.
Mr. David.
Yeah.
Sorry, we can't see your screen.
Ah, now that may be because I didn't share it. Let me go back to here. I apologize. I hadn't shared my screen. Goodness me, that's a track for young players. All right, so sharing screen now. All right, thank you for telling me. All right, so if I go to here, so you should see the producer surplus screen now?
Yep. Yes.
Good. All right, so as said before, what we've got here is we've got individual quantities here based on the cost structures of those particular businesses. So a business is for this quantity, it's going to cost them this much to produce it. So they would actually be prepared to accept this price in the market, but they're actually receiving this price. So they're gaining a whole big surplus of revenue on top of what they would have been prepared to accept. And it goes all the way along, all the way up the curve to there. Okay, so that's the triangle shape there of producer surplus. Half the base times the height would give you the area. And as said before, above the supply curve, below the price is how you identify it visually on the diagram where it is. All right, so it is the excess or the difference between what producers are willing and able to supply and the price that they actually get in the market. Now you can probably tell why I wanted to do this now, because you've done consumer surplus, and so if we map up to here, you can actually see why it is quite important to do them both together. So here is consumer surplus, and here producer surplus. All right. Now, what can you tell me about that? If you look at it, what can you tell me? Anything? What's happening? Something's happening. This is a bit of an extra for experts. I don't know that you'll figure this one out, but we'll see. Can you figure anything out that's happening there?
Is it like the consumer surplus and the producer surplus kind of like meets in the middle when it gets to that line, that red line?
Yeah, they do. They do meet in the middle, absolutely. It's also got to do with this equilibrium here. All right. What would happen if the market was having a price set up here? So if the price was above the equilibrium, what would we see happen? If there was a disequilibrium, what would we see happen?
Does the producer surplus increase and consumer surplus decrease?
Yeah, maybe. If the price was above the equilibrium. No, I might be pushing it a bit too hard. All right, okay. So here's what I'm wanting. All right, there's your equilibrium price and quantity. There's the equilibrium. All right, so on this model, you can very easily, I hope, identify where consumer surplus is and then where producer surplus is. You can also see that they are both triangles, so you can work out half base times height with regards to the actual area under the curves. All right. Now, that's if they want you to do the maths, and I would expect them to want you to do the maths at some point in the future. So can I do this next bit? Let me see now. Yeah, have I told you that one? All right, so there's an actual calculation, a worked out example. Now, we've done it very straightforward for you. Right, we've tried to eliminate any complexity, and it's just literally half of the base times the height of the triangle. However, right, we've also, by doing that, we've kind of made the two triangles almost equal in size, almost, but they don't have to be equal in size. All right, so just bear that in mind. Now, do I do one more? Let's have a look. Yeah, here we go. In the market model, where would you see allocative efficiency? We had a definition for allocative efficiency not that long ago. Where do we see it in an individual market?
Where supply meets demand, because allocative efficiency is what the society, like the combination of good society most desires. So if consumers only demand that amount, suppliers will only supply that amount. So allocative efficiency will be in where supply meets demand.
Well done, Rockstar. Absolutely right. So allocative efficiency is going to be where the equilibrium is between supply and demand, where supply equals demand, where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. But what can we tell about our consumer and our producer surplus at that point? All right, this is well pushing it into the realm of extra for experts. Is there anything you can tell me about consumer and producer surplus and allocative efficiency?
Producer surplus, they don't profit,
Mm-hmm.
and consumer surplus, they pay exactly what they were expecting to.
Okay, that's an idea. Any other thoughts?
Could it be where there is no surplus because it's exactly at the point where they both end?
That's a good one for a PhD discussion. Excuse me. Goodness me. Yeah, you might be overthinking it a little bit. If you have a look at the model again, see if you can tell me about the two triangles that represent the area of consumer surplus and producer surplus. Is there anything you can tell me about them?
The right angle triangles.
They are right angle triangles. Okay. All right. Now, if I was to grab this, I can't, all right, quite clearly. But if I was to grab this number here, this dotted line, and if I was to move it this way, all right, and the further I moved it this way, the more of a disequilibrium we would see, okay, because supply isn't equal in demand. You see that? But if I move it this way, then it's becoming an equilibrium, and it ends up at an equilibrium. So if we imagine that this is kind of like a moving scale, and if I was to move this one down, I am actually reducing the size. Do you see that? I'm reducing the size of the triangles. If this moves in, this quantity number moves in. Okay. So if the quantity was here, and I was to draw a dotted line all the way up here, yeah, then we would lose all of this and this. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So at an equilibrium, this triangle and this triangle are the word beginning with. You're going to say best, aren't you?
Sorry, sir, you cut out. What does the word begin with?
The word begins with the letter B. At this equilibrium, if it was here or here or here, this triangle and this triangle would be, they wouldn't be triangles by that, but they'd be smaller. So if we get to this quantity here at the equilibrium, this triangle and this triangle are the word beginning.
They can be?
Sorry?
The biggest they can be?
Yes, genius, Rockstar, well done. Absolutely. They're the biggest they can be. All right, and the word we use in economics to explain this is that they are at their maximum. So by being at an equilibrium, another way to explain allocative efficiency is that consumer surplus and producer surplus are at the maximum level they can be. They've been maximized. We are maximizing that additional welfare that consumers and producers get. Can't do any better than that. You get to there, that's the best you can do. All right, we can do worse than that, absolutely. If we're in a disequilibrium, we can be well worse than that. All right, but at that point, that's the best we can do. All right, so that is why I wanted to introduce this now, all right, because it matches with the consumer surplus and it ties it in with the idea of allocative efficiency. Okay, now I'm going to stop sharing. Whoop. A little bit to meet. All right, so consumer surplus, producer surplus, at a point of equilibrium, excuse me, at a point of equilibrium. They are the maximum, the biggest they can possibly be. Therefore, that is another example of allocative efficiency, because you can't make them any bigger. Right? That's the extra for experts bit. Right? And we're going to see that, because eventually what we're going to do is we're going to start moving the curves around, seeing what happens to consumer and producer surplus. But we're also going to have the government intervening in the market. And when the government intervenes in the market, we're actually going to see what's called a welfare loss. We're actually going to see some of that welfare, some of that consumer and producer surplus disappear. Right? And therefore we can say that's inefficient, right? Which is part of our major theme. Right, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I was wanting to cover. So therefore I'm going to open the floor now to Q&A. If you have no Q&A, then you might like to, you don't have to stay on the line. If you have got a Q&A that you'd like to ask, you can ask now. There you go.
So
Yeah.
we only have to, in our pathways, it'll be like the introduction to economics, how do economists think, supply, demand, and behavioral economics, right?
I bit raspy this morning, wheezy. The what we're after is introduction to economics. All right, behavioral economics would be a good one. All right, so that covers a lot of your PPC models. It's a little bit about history of economic thought, but not a lot in there. All right, supply and demand can be in there, in the sense that you can actually, and I double checked, in the exam, you can actually write in your answers about supply and demand. It is possible to do that, all right, and to use some of your supply and demand understanding to help you answer the actual questions. However, there is no specific supply or demand question in your exam.
All right, thank you.
Mr. David,
Yeah.
can you go through a little bit about the PPF curve?
Yes.
Yeah, the production probability frontier, I think.
Yeah. All right. So you're thinking about the production possibility frontier.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I wonder if this will work. I don't know. Apparently, I'm creating a jam. Yes, everybody send. Right, now, I don't know if you can see the jam. Does this appear on your screen, a Jamboard?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a way to do this, hopefully quite quickly. Right. Okay, so PPFs, PPCs, all right, we've got two products. So we've got product A there and we've got product B there. Do economics tend to refer to them as capital goods and consumer goods? That is one particular philosophy that we can say. But it is this idea here of what is possible to produce. Put a sticky note in. All right, so it is possible to produce given the scarce resources. All right, so I can just check that over there. So all of these combinations of A and B are possible to produce given the scarce resources that we have. If we are inside, so point here, then that is going to be, so X is inefficient. Right, as it is not fully using resources. Right, so any point inside is inefficient. because it's not fully using the resources. So therefore, being on the curve is efficient, production efficient, and there will be one point that will be allocatively efficient, right? And so therefore, on the curve is efficient, inside the curve inefficient. If you're on the curve and you go, I have to draw that than I thought. Okay, so you've got a gain here of B, you've got a loss here of A, so that is your opportunity cost, all right, where you've gained, by gaining B, you have given up some of your production of A, right, so that's your opportunity cost. And the reason why you have to do that is because, again, you've got that scarce resources, you've got to make a choice. The idea that we had about economic growth was that what was possible to produce has increased. We've discovered new resources, we've become more productive, those sorts of ideas. All of a sudden, it's now possible to produce more resources. Right? Any point out here is actually inefficient. Well, it's unobtainable. So point Y. Okay, it's unobtainable due to scarce resources and fixed quality. I'm good at the spelling. All right. Okay, so does that make sense?
That's it for PPF curve.
Well, you can consider, there are other theories, like you can talk about economic growth from just one sector. You can talk about a decline in economic growth, so a recession, more than that. You could talk about what's called intertemporal choice. So if you've got capital goods and consumer goods and you choose to increase your investment in capital goods, so you're going the other way, you're going up here and down here, then you'd see economic growth in the future. All right. What does that do? Is that a laser? Laser. All right. So you'd be going this way and this way, and this one would then be economic growth in the future.
If the curve grows smaller, it's called a recession, right?
Yeah, probably a more accurate term is a decrease or a decline in economic growth. I'd avoid using the word recession. I know I did, but I shouldn't have. Avoid using the word recession or depression. Just negative economic growth is better.
Okay. Before you were saying some fancy words, I didn't catch that before.
Yep. Temporal choice. All right, so you are choosing between two time periods. You are investing in capital or then consumer goods, creating a more productive future. In good old spelling, those works well. So if you invest more in capital goods, then you're going to see an increase in growth potential in the future. That's what the idea of intertemporal choice is. So you're reducing your current consumption to increase your future consumption. So intertemporal, intertime.
Oh, okay, I got it.
We do talk about how this is a curved curve. And when we say that, we are talking about increasing opportunity cost. And that's due to the nature of the resources. If it was a straight line, then there would be constant opportunity costs. And that constant opportunity cost, therefore, would mean that the resources are more or less easily able to be used in either production process. This one here, we're saying, because it's curved, that the resources aren't easily able to be used between the two production processes, so there's a loss that occurs, right, when you switch production from one product to another that causes it to bow out, and that loss increases over time. Well, increases with an increase in production.
All right. Thank you, Mr. David.
No problem. Now I'm not sure what I do with this. Do I do share? No, you've already got it, haven't you? Done. Close that. Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. David,
Yeah.
I'm confused about the topic biases and rationality.
That's quite a big topic to be confused
Yeah,
about at
please
this particular
explain.
point. Okay, so how do I do this? I'll do another jam. I quite like this jam idea now. I'm going to do another one. Right, and share. I might do this more often because it's quite fun. Right, so we say all humans have biases. Right, one of our fundamental statements so far. All humans have biases. We all act alongside biases, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Quite often we say biases are bad, right? But it's not necessarily that they are bad. We are biased towards things that are perhaps harmful to us or dangerous sort of situations. We will always be biased against those. It's just how we apply our biases sometimes that aren't necessarily always good, all right? We live in a world of imperfect information, so we need to use what are called cognitive, H-E-U-R-I-S-T-I-C-S, heuristics, or shortcuts to figure out our decisions. Yeah, however we've got decisions. Enough. All right. Ah, where'd it go? There it is. All right. So I can actually make it bigger. Look at that. Okay. Now the difference was in the old days, okay, we assumed everybody was rational. These days, we assume everybody has biases, everybody has imperfect information, everybody is using these cognitive heuristics, right, or shortcuts to figure out the decisions, and they base decisions more on satisfaction than optimality. All right, so what we're meaning there is that you come to a decision and you say, yeah, I'm happy with that. All right. Okay, like me with my spelling, I could have gone back in and made that perfect, but I can't be bothered. All right. So I've made a decision based on the level of satisfaction that I have, but it's not optimal. Right, and that's the same with your consumption decisions. That's how that all works. Right. So we need to make sure that the old theory, which is everybody is rational, everybody will sit there with their calculators, working out their levels of utility, working out the greatest good for everybody, right, figuring all of these things out. Well, it doesn't work. So we now need to think about all of these, and that leads to the idea of needing to include nudges, all right, to encourage more socially acceptable behavior. All right, so governments, producers, They're going to want you to do something, and they know all of this. Okay, so they are going to include nudge theory in particular. All right, and those nudges, they're going to link to your shortcuts that you have. All right, because that's how the theory works. Okay, because the nudge will only work if the shortcut is there. If the shortcut isn't there, and nudges, increasingly people are more aware of this sort of idea, so nudges are increasingly not working. But if nudges can work, then they can encourage you to be more socially aware, thinking about the environment or thinking about other people. Yes. So, yeah. Okay. Does that make sense?
Thank
So
you.
in essence, it's all about the decisions that consumers are making and that producers are making, the impact then that it has on how those decisions are made so that they are more satisfied than they are optimal decisions. And it also means that there is room for perhaps changes to the level of perfect or imperfect information. Governments can get involved with that. You can also link it to the idea about nudges and what do they do. You can also link it to the conflict between traditional economic thinking and behavioral economic thinking. All right? And the laws that we have established, like the law of demand, okay, do they actually still work in the modern context, or are there more decisions being based on satisfaction than there are optimality, as the theory might suggest? All right. Okay. Is that okay?
Yes.
So, Mr. David, that's
Yeah.
that's the total answer to if it is a question like, what if consumers do not behave rationally, right? That's how we answer the question. Like, we include all those points: how the government uses the nudge, producer uses nudge, consumers uses nudge, and also like how we like more like what's about satisfaction than optimality, correct? So that's the answer to like the question about what if consumers do not behave rationally, right?
Yes, it is.
Got it.
Positive and normative statements in economics. Sorry, I've missed a few. Wenhao has said overprices. I don't know what Wenhao means with that. You might need to explain that, Wenhao. If you invest in capital goods, you'll see more output later. Yes, absolutely. That's the idea. Something we're going to come back to. Mr. David, can you explain the importance of positive and normative statements in economic decisions, and can you give some examples? Yeah, I kind of can. Trying to play devil's advocate a little bit, and that you need to be coming up with the examples. Positive and normative statements, we need to have very clear definitions for those. We need to know that one is values-based and therefore subjective, and one is statistics, quantitative-based, and therefore very objective. All right, and that we're going to use these, okay, when we are setting government policy in particular. All right, we're going to use the statements that are about people's values, their heart, what they are actually interested in order to set, say, government policy going forward. And then we are going to use some objective statements in order to measure how effective those government policies are. I mean, classic example, you've got the American election going on at the moment. And if ever there was a time to be looking at statements of value versus statements of objectivity, now is it. Okay, so the US economy grew by 30%, right, year on year. And the only reason why it grew by 30%, this is another thing about numbers lying, why it grew by 30% is, well, it's the interpretation. The numbers haven't lied, but it's the interpretation of the numbers. It's because their economy went down by that much and then it's just jumped back up. All right. So, yeah, Donald Trump saying, "Way, look at what I've done to the economy. Isn't this amazing?" And the reality is, no, nothing like what we're talking about. So, all politicians, they're going to come out with statements about, say, for example, in America, about healthcare. But they need to know from individuals within America what they want with regards to healthcare. So their values, what do they feel is the right thing? And then once they've figured that out, then they devise a policy that creates the healthcare. And then they say, okay, has it met the objective? It's met the objective by this amount and this amount and this amount. Yeah. So employment, we want employment. We want to have a job. Okay. Well, okay. So to what level do we want employment, and how are we going to measure that, right, as a statistic? Right? Are we going to look at part-time versus full-time employment? Are we going to look at employment on the basis of age and gender, ethnic groups? You know, we want jobs as the value-based statement, but we want jobs for these people in this way, in this context, earning this amount of money, equal opportunity, equal access, more the value-based. But how do we measure that? Well, how many women are CEOs? You can measure, that's objective. Those sorts of things. You wanting equal access to higher education. Well, then again, you've got to look at women and different ethnic groups and what percentage of them objectively are in those, you know, yeah. So using them both, you're going to be able to craft a government policy that hopefully will be able to match with the values of society. I'm going to suggest putting kids in cages is not the values of society, but that's just me. Okay, other questions? Do we need to know the famous economists for the pathways? That's a tougher one for me to sort of explain again. It's similar to the market model. It is theoretically possible for you to include information about famous economists into the questions that you're going to answer in the pathway exam. There are no specific questions on the famous economists, the history of economic thought, but it is theoretically possible for you to include some of the information in your answers. Yeah. But you're not penalized for not. Yeah. Not saying it wouldn't be good. But, yeah.
Sir,
Yeah.
is the paper gonna be hard?
Well, that's always a tough question. I don't believe so. I believe it is well achievable, but it's very much it's much different from what I'm used to you sitting, right? Because I'm used to obviously the old syllabus now, and this is new also for me. It's more English based. It's more like writing an essay, using your economic understanding. So that's what it's more about, okay? Because the HL learners are going to have their own paper, just a single standalone paper eventually, where you are going to be writing, criticizing economic policy. So you're going to need to be able to write and include those thoughts and theories into it. Yeah? So that will be the best one. Now, if I do the sharing of the screen, I'm guessing has somebody been through with you the whole how it all works? Guessing they might have. It's going to look something like this. Exam.net, and that's your actual exam sitting there, because this is my end of it. This is what I see. And then all I do is I give you a key. Don't take that down now. Doesn't really matter, but don't take it down. And then when it is time, I open it. Okay, even if you've got the key, you can't open it. Right, and then I open the exam. I'm able to go through and have a look at it. I'm able to see what you're doing. Ooh, spooky. I can see what you're doing when you're answering it. And I can obviously also preview the exam. There are other things that I can do as well in there, which are quite fun. I can change individual settings as well, which is quite clever. Oops, no, this one. Right, so any other particular questions? As to whether it's hard, I don't personally think so. I think you, with the caliber of writers and thinkers that you all are, I think you will all be absolutely fine, so long as you've reviewed the work, you know. If you're going into it not having reviewed the work, or, you know, spend half an hour the night before trying desperately to stare at your notes, then yeah, it's going to be a struggle. I did have that 1 year, by the way. In fact, I've had that a couple of years in a row. How much time did you spend on the exam? Half an hour, the night before. Okay. So yeah, I will be with you at the start of the exam and the end of the exam, and I'll be able to see how you're doing. If there are any particular problems, I guess I'll be able to try and help fix them. I don't think that there will be. It is quite straightforward. All right. I'm not necessarily expecting you to need to draw any diagrams in the exam. I have, however, turned on the functionality of drawing diagrams in the exam if you need to. If you feel all of a sudden you want to draw a diagram, then there will be the tools that you have to be able to do that. But you don't necessarily need to.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Any other questions? You can always email me as well. That's all fine. Now, as far as I'm aware, it's going from Monday. So therefore, Wednesday is when I will be seeing you. So I won't see you on Tuesday, okay, at all. All right. But I will see you on the Wednesday, because the Wednesday is the actual exam. Right.
So how's it gonna work? Are we gonna be on the Meet at the same time?
Yes.
And on that website? Oh, okay.
No, well, you're going to be on the. Yeah, in theory, what I will do is I will post through the classroom the Meet code, not the Meet code, the exam code, and then you will go into exam.net and use the code, and once the exam starts, I have to turn that on button, then you'll just write or type. There is functionality, interestingly enough, for you to handwrite your answers and scan them in, believe it or not, as well. I don't know whether that's an effective thing or not, but that is possible too. And there's also functionality to have translated things in there. There's actually quite a lot. Is it okay to send emails on Monday and Tuesday if you have questions? Absolutely. Can't guarantee that I'll answer them in time to help you at all, but yes, absolutely. If you're sending me things at like 9:30 or at night or 1 in the morning or some such thing, yeah, I'm not going to reply immediately, but I will do my best to get back to you. Okay. So if there are no further questions, then we can stop. You can have a wee brain break. So as said, so if next week is the exams, you have no actual lessons, but you just have your exam. So please pay attention to that exam timetable, which I think Miss Amanda has shared with you, I'm hoping. I have shared the economics time with you, and so unless that changes, I don't think it will. Please do just turn up on time, all right, or a little bit before maybe, all right, and just get there, because it's not a meet per se, it'll just be the exam. I will be able to see what you're doing. It will allow me to see if you are stopping and having breaks. It will allow me to see if you are jumping between different websites, all of those sorts of things it will allow me to see. So just write, just type, and whatever you've got is whatever you've got, okay? When government intervention is applied to fix imperfection of markets, what is example of that imperfection? I was thinking more about imperfect information in the comment. I'm thinking that's what you're referring to, the comment I made about imperfect information. So the government quite often will get involved with imperfect information. They will, you know, publicise health and safety standards. They will publicise. They will require businesses to say, you know, to have ingredient lists on the backs of their products. They will send notices out like KKM do this, you know, don't buy this product because it's not good for you. You know, that sort of is what I was thinking about, and the government is doing that. It's not coming from businesses themselves, because it would be a whole lot cheaper for them not to do that. There will be a whole lot of other interventions that we're going to be talking about, but that comes later. No problem, Kendra. All right. Okay then. Well, as we'd say in the land of my birth, hei kōne rā, and all the best for next week. And yeah, we will see you when we see you.
Bye, sir. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Take care. Have a good weekend.
You too. 2, 1, just me.